it's your boy Caleb and welcome to my channel, Prodigy Kids. My goal is to make learning fun and interesting because knowledge is power. I'm fresh off of a beach vacation and as you can see, I'm a bit more bronzed than I was in my last video. For those of you who are unaware, black people need to wear sunscreen when out in the sun for extended periods of time. I put on sunscreen and I still got sunburn on my beautiful face. Okay, I'll try not to laugh. I put on sunscreen and I still got sunburn on my beautiful face. It's hot out there, folks. Wear sunscreen, people. Today's video is about a story I heard while visiting Amelia Island, Florida. That is where I spent my beach vacation. My producer, while doing research on things to do in the area, learned about a place called American Beach. This beach was just a few minutes away from where we were staying, so we decided to check it out. We stopped by the A.L. Lewis Museum, which unfortunately was closed for renovation. But while we were there, the museum curator and director, Miss Carol J. Alexander, just happened to be at the museum. She came outside, introduced herself, and we became instant friends. She even gave me a sneak peek at the renovations going on inside the museum. Before we headed into the museum, my producer filmed Miss Alexander as she gave me an oral history of American Beach. This was all quite spontaneous and unplanned. I want to share the story of American Beach with you today. I hope you enjoy.
And when I first came to Florida, it was like a visit. Just like you're visiting. Something very special happened to me. I was over at where you are staying now. And I was staying there. At that time, it was called the Amelia Island Plantation. Plantation? Plantations are what? Where black folk used to be what? Enslaved. We used to work for no money. And here I am coming to the Amelia Island Plantation. It was a bunch of Caucasian folk, or white folk, as you may not know the name Caucasian. Bunch of white folk were at where you're staying now. And we were the only, and I had a little baby. He was 9 months old. His name was Garrett. And I started walking the beach. And I kept walking and walking, and I had him tied on my back. He was so little, big, chubby little boy. And I was walking and walking because I just wanted to get away from the people. And I kept walking, and he started wiggling and moving, and I bent down to kind of get the little piece together, and I saw this shadow on the sand. And as the shadow kept coming, it got taller and taller and taller. And I looked up, and then I just decided that I would untie him and put him down, but I just took him because, like your mother does, mommies protect. And I looked up, and I saw this beautiful 6-foot-tall woman. And she had long locks, and she had nails, and she said, "Baby, just put him down. There's a little swell of the water right there, and at this time of day, it's warm. Just put him down." So I put Garrett down, and I just began to talk to her, and there was something about her that was so very special, and we connected instantly. So fast forward at that story, she began to tell me, "Baby, you are on American Beach. And my great-grandfather founded the beach in 1935. 5. She had a magic number of 5. It's the same year that I was born, she would say. I was born in 1935. And he founded this beach. Do you know, she would say, he was Florida's first black millionaire. And I looked up and I said, "Oh, really?" And we talked and talked and talked. We talked so long that I had forgotten that I had a husband, just like I met you, and I had another husband. He was back at the hotel. So we go back, and then the next day, I start to walk again. And I didn't see her. And she said, my name is Marvine Betch. And I just kept walking and walking and walking, and I didn't see her. Then I started seeing these old houses, and I kept walking and walking and walking. And I moved around. There was nobody on the beach. And then when I got up there, like I saw one black folk too, and I didn't even really remember her name. And then as I kept walking, I saw down the street. She said, "Hey, baby, welcome to American Beach." So I say to you when I walked out that door, "Hey, baby, how y'all doing? We're closed." But I say, "Welcome to American Beach." So let me tell you this story. In 1900, in Jacksonville, Florida, probably where you all are driving or flew into, you drove. That you had to drive through to get here, I guess. And Jacksonville, Florida is a whole nother story when it comes to the history of black folk. Because at the time, it was an encampment during the Civil War where the Union, the colored soldiers were. That's what they used to call us. That's where they encamped. And after the Civil War, they brought all of them down here. And you hear a lot about the Emancipation Proclamation and when Africans were freed from slavery, and you hear a lot about Juneteenth. That really doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because there were some Africans, especially the Africans in the state of Florida, who were freed before the Africans were told that they were freed in Texas. So this General Sherman came up to this Amelia Island, and he had a paper that Lincoln gave him, that Lincoln had made this emancipation to free the slaves so he could end the war. And Sherman came here, and he read on this island that the Union had taken over here, that all of the enslaved people from where you're from Charleston, South Carolina, all the way down to Florida, 245 miles inland, all of this land where Africans were enslaved, they all would be free. And all of those Africans would receive 40 acres. Hence, you hear some story about 40 acres and a mule, but they didn't say a mule. They would get 40 acres. So fast forward with that, it did happen. And then Lincoln died. And then when Lincoln died, the Confederate president came in, and they took some of all this land. But this part of this land here, they didn't take back. So there's the black soldiers down in Jacksonville. You have the enslaved people who were on the Harrison Plantation here, and they called it Franklintown. And where you are staying was an incorporated black town that the slave masters had given their ex-slaves, the Harrisons, and they created Franklintown. Now it's a resort. And you are staying on it. So as things go in Jacksonville, fast forward, in 1901, a group of men, 7, they met at Bethel Baptist Church. All of them were not Baptists. The one I'm getting ready to tell you about, A.L. Lewis, he was AME. They were 7 men, and they created, at that year, the name Afro. We were called colored, we were called Negro, but they called it Afro Industrial and Benefit Association. And they were collecting money for black folk. When they got sick or died, they could get money just like an insurance. And that was the first insurance company of Florida, black or white. Fast forward, Jacksonville burned down to the ground 6 months after they started that insurance company. Fast forward, there was a lady that got all of their files, took it to this man named Abraham Lincoln Lewis, who was born in 1865, you know? Right after Abraham Lincoln died, and black folk thought that he freed everybody. So why do you think his mother and father named him Abraham Lincoln Lewis in 1865? Well, Abraham Lincoln Lewis was only the treasurer of this company, but all the other men were pastors and everything. They had to go do it because everything got burned down, and he kept this company going. He eventually became president. He only had a 6th grade education, but he was brilliant. And he kept this company going, became a president. And then he said, black folk need to have money when they die. The people who are working here, we need a pension fund. So they made the pension fund in the 20s. Meantime, he bought a golf course so that black folk could go and play golf, because you know they couldn't play golf. Then there were these black beaches, because do you know that they would not allow us to sit in the front of the bus? They wouldn't allow us to drink out of the water fountain. You heard all of that. But you know what else they wouldn't do? They wouldn't allow us to be on a beach. So Jacksonville had an ordinance that said no white person or any colored person could be within 500 yards of each other, and they would be arrested on a beach. I got that bill up in there. So this A.L. Lewis would take the company employees up to where you're staying now, called Franklintown, because these were black folk who were right next to the Atlantic Ocean. Beaches and stuff as we know it, and resorts, they weren't in vogue. They would come up here from Jacksonville so that they could have all of their families have outings and be away from all the Jim Crow and segregation, and they would come up here. Then one day, this Abraham Lincoln Lewis, he started calling his name A.L. because he didn't like Abraham Lincoln, A.L. Lewis. He started saying there's some land available. So he talked to a white lawyer, and the white lawyer said, I will help and intercede. So they bought the first parcel of this land, 33 acres. They bought it, and he called it American Beach, because he said, we're as American as everybody else. So they bought the first parcel, 33, then they bought another 100 acres, and then they got some more. That's a whole nother story. There was 216 acres of land. Wow. American Beach. And the slogan that he would say, this A.L. Lewis says, that we're bringing it for recreation and relaxation without humiliation. Because we couldn't have recreation and relaxation as families on a beach, like you're having stuff on the beach with your family, and humiliated because they said, you're black, you can't do this, you're black, you can't. But we don't have this humiliation here on American Beach, he would say. So this is 1935, and then 1940s came. There was the recession, but black folk were buying land and buying houses and all of that here on this black beach. The only black beach. All the other black beaches, they burnt down. Fast forward. He has children. One of his great-grandchildren, her name was Mavine Oshun Betch. Her mother was A.L. Lewis's grandchild. His great-grandchild, Mavine, became an opera singer. He has another great-grandchild who was very famous. Her name is Dr. Janetta Cole, the only woman who was head of 2 colleges, Spelman and Bennett College for women. Your mama knows. She lived down the street around the corner. And the third one is a famous jazz drummer named John Betch. Well, Mavine was famous in Europe in the 50s, where black folk weren't singing anywhere. Roland Hayes, somebody else you need to do a story on. And then she was there for years, and then she came back because her grandfather, not A.L., but James, and her mother died, and then she came back. And this, they were getting ready to give away because the white developers had gone into Franklintown and bought up all of the land, and they built where you are staying now, a resort for people who don't look like us at that time. A resort. But American Beach was still here. And so Mavine would move around this lady that I met in 80, that with my baby on the back, and she would move around, talk about, let me tell you about my great-grandfather, A.L. Lewis. He bought this beach. He was the first black millionaire. Let me tell you about all the famous people who live here and bought land. Let me tell you about Cab Calloway and Dizzy Gillespie and Zora Neale Hurston. Zora Neale Hurston, her first wedding was right here. And all of these famous black people would come right here. Let me tell you the history. And then integration happened, and a lot of black folk didn't have to just come here. They started going to other beaches. But she's tried to make the history. So Ronald Reagan, right during the time when I met her, Ronald Reagan was the president. Remember hearing the name Ronald Reagan? he was the president, and she was trying to save the land and everything. And she said, you know what? I don't like that Ronald Reagan. I don't like anything about Ronald Reagan. So you know what she did? Her name was Marvine, and her name was spelled Marvne. She said, I don't like him. I'm going to take everything out of my being and name. So she took the R out of her name and became Marvine, M-A capital V-Y-N-E-E. Then she started growing her nails and her hair. Why? Because she started to attract people. And she knew, because she was an opera singer, that any way that you tell a story, you have to have features and be dramatic. I was so
Like I am.
Yes, you are. That's why I knew when I met you. I knew there was something special. That's why you had to know this story. So she ended up growing her fingernails. They were 2 feet long. She ended up growing her hair. It was 6 feet long. I used to have dreadlocks, and mine were long down to my waist, but they were individual locks. Hers were all one long lock. She became so famous, all of the media, the newspapers, magazines, they would come as far as California, Miami, Philadelphia, Detroit, just to do the story about this 6-foot-tall woman with long nails and long hair, and she could tell you stories about her great-grandfather, and she knew everything about trees and engineering. She was brilliant. And she had a thing about 5. She said everything great started in 5. You know what? You got 5 fingers on your left hand. You got 5 fingers on your right hand. Abraham Lincoln Lewis was born in 1960.
5.
I was born, she said, in 1930.
5.
The American beach, the first black beach in Florida, was built in 1930.
5.
Ooh, Rosa Parks sat on the bus in 1950.
5.
Ooh, she would go on and on and on and on. You know that baby I told you about? I had him and he grew up, and then I had another baby and he grew up, and then I had another baby, and each baby, after the first one, she would help deliver them. I became her spiritual daughter, people said. And everything I wouldn't know, because the kids just began being like, that's their grandmother. But they knew that magic happens at 5. And she said things like, you know, there's going to be something that you will always remember when it comes to 5. Well, in 2005, Hurricane Katrina, she got very ill. We brought her to our house. And then she said, it will be on 5. And Carol, that's my name. These are the 5 things that I want you to do. And I'm going to show you the 5 in a minute. 1, you're going to make a museum. Because you know, you made that museum in Jacksonville, because I built a museum in Jacksonville called the Ritz Theater and La Villa Museum. Number 2, you will cut my hair and put it in that museum. She said, number 3, get ready for September 5. Number 4, make sure you note the time. So, she wanted me to cut her hair. She did get very ill. She died September
5.
2005 at 5:05 a.m. So I did what she asked me to do. I did cut her hair. There are other personal things that I did to prepare her. As she went to the sky, she's still probably listening. She's going to probably saying, "You've got to tell Caleb about that other 5." But what I'm going to show you is her hair, because we made this museum about the story of her great-grandfather and about her. So, during COVID, I closed it because everything was closed, and then we began to do more research about A.L. Lewis. And I've kept it closed, and now I'm tearing it down to reopen it. But there's some things that they're still there that you could see. You want to see them? Okay. Let's tell our producer and manager, cut. That was awesome.
Did you learn something new and interesting today? If you did, be sure to share this video with a friend. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss all the great information I have for you. Until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and rise up. Bye!